Okay, teachers, we are back. I have been loving this series. This is our third installment out of 6, and we are looking at 6 different ways to use close reading as a supplement. And this is kind of contradictory to what we normally have been doing with close reading. And what we've normally been doing is close reading the novel that we are in that unit for, right? So when we read whatever the novel might be, right? Maybe, or even the play, maybe you're in the middle of Macbeth, and in Macbeth, you're watching Act 1, and then you're going to close read some scenes. You're going to watch Act 2, then you're going to close read some scenes. Whatever it might be, that's traditionally how we use close reading, and it's amazing. And I talk a lot about that in my other 2 masterclasses about close reading and instruction. Now, this series and what we're getting deeper into each and every video is that, in fact, we can do those close readings, but maybe we can also pull in supplemental texts that share similar text features, that share similar author's choice techniques, that share any kind of similarity that we really want students to hone in on. We can pair text within our units. And what's really cool about today's especially is that this is an example of how we can pair texts and really broaden the horizon of our students in 2 ways. One is in genre. What I love about what we're going to share today is that it's a genre that maybe you don't either have the capacity or the ability or the go-ahead to do on its own. And then the second is the voice and the experience of this protagonist. Into the specifics about the book that we're looking at today, I want to talk about the device and what we're going to pull from this particular piece, and that is metaphors and comparisons. I've talked about this in our other videos during this series, and I want to underscore it one more time. Just because today we're focusing on metaphor, I wanted to make sure that I also used the word comparison. Nothing about this experience is about pigeonholing students into the terminology wars. At no point in this exercise am I recommending a Kahoot of literary term review. There's no need. And I know that that's kind of a comfort area for a lot of teachers. We feel like we need to review the devices. They need to have a working knowledge and definition of all the devices. And sometimes we tell that to ourselves to a point where they have to do all of this before they can possibly enter into anything else. And I feel like this is similar to what I share with teachers about with pre-reading. Sometimes students don't need everything up front. Front loading is a thing. It is a good thing, and it is a helpful thing. Creating schema, right? I'm not arguing against that research and that very important stuff, especially for struggling readers and new English language learners. However, sometimes our front loading is so massive that by the time we actually get to some of those things that we front loaded, we've created a really big distance between the loading zone and the experience of that in real life or in the text. And so when I talk about metaphors and comparisons, I think we can, define it till we're blue in the face. We can talk about metaphors until we're blue in the face. We can really overdo it, and that's fine. But similar to personification, a lot of students get stuck after they've identified it. They've defined it, they've identified it, they've highlighted it, they've said, I found a metaphor, and then they're kind of trying to coast off into the next thing without ever telling us, so what, right? They haven't really ventured into exploring why these 2 things were being compared. Why choose this? What is the impact of this comparison versus this other one? What was the author's choice? What was the impact of the author's choice? And so when we talk today about metaphors and comparisons, if a student calls it a simile, great. If they call it a metaphor, cool. If they call it a comparison, That's awesome. And I'm promising you, I am coming to you from a College Board approved set of teachers who have given me the reminder and the okay that labeling is not as important as analyzing and getting past that identification marker and into the discussion, the commentary about what they've observed. Observing things we need to get past that, and that's what I think is challenging for students, but what close reading is going to give us the chance to do. So I would like to introduce to you all this incredible novel. We Are All So Good at Smiling. This is a novel in verse. So back to what I was saying earlier in this video, I think what's really cool about using YA novels or just novels in general as supplements is that we can give students additional exposure to things that might not get their own unit. I don't know how many schools are approving novels in verse for a whole class experience. I hope there are lots of schools approving it and giving kids the chance to explore a novel in verse as its own unit. But from the coaching that I do, the traveling I do, the work I've done in schools lately, novels in verse are not getting their own solitary whole class units. They're getting maybe some space in lit circles, maybe they're getting reference in a poetry unit, but I have yet to see a widespread use of novels in verse as a standalone. So all that is to say, this is a great place for, as a supplement, students might be reading, oh my gosh, with metaphor, I don't even need to suggest a pairing to you because it could be anything. Whatever novel they're reading, whatever the whole class text is that is making use of metaphor frequently. I think right off the bat, I think about In the Time of the Butterflies. Julia Alvarez, she uses that butterfly motif metaphor all throughout her novel, and I think that would be a really cool one to pair here. But we're going to get the chance to not only do your novel unit, but then kids get to read a little bit of a novel in verse. The second benefit of this text specifically is that Amber McBride's protagonist in this story is a protagonist, and we're going to see this also in Turtles All the Way Down, is a protagonist who is struggling with her mental health, really struggling. And so the novel in verse, the pensive way that she approaches life and in this passage is so beautiful. And we don't have a lot of protagonists that give us the chance to really talk about mental health and talk about some of the spiraling thoughts that these kinds of narrators have. Again, we will see this again in another passage that I pulled. And a female Black author is another voice that's been relatively silenced in the literary canon. So we've got lots and lots of reasons that this particular piece is wonderful to bring into a unit. If you don't have enough of that in other places, let's start getting it in here. Let's start making it part of the conversation in a real, authentic, and important close reading kind of a way. And let's open up doors for more of these kinds of texts taking on their own stature in our curriculums down the line. But this is a great way to introduce it to students. The story for We Are So Good at Smiling, I'll give you a quick overview and then we'll hop right into the passage. By the way, I could have pulled like anything. I could have pulled so many of the poems from this novel that would have just been so good. It was really hard to narrow it down to just one. So that's that. Whimsy is back in the hospital for treatment of clinical depression. When she meets a boy named Fairy, she recognizes they both have magic in the marrow of their bones. After they are released, Fairy and his family move to the same neighborhood as Whimsy. Two friends come to realize that their lifelines may have twined and untwined many times before. They are both terrified of the forest and the end of Marsh Creek Lane. The forest whispers to Whimsy. The forest might hold the answers to the part of the fairy he feels is missing. They discover that the forest holds monsters, fairy tales, and pain that they have both been running from for the past 11 years. And soon, they understand that the only way out is through. So, we also, I didn't even mention it earlier, we also have fantasy. So there are so many cool pieces that are woven into this story that, again, we don't see very often on their own. So let's add it into something traditional, something something atypical with something typical, and let's surprise students and see what they do with it. Let's jump in and take a look at a passage. So, metaphor and comparison are going to be the focus of this passage. And what I'd really like to do for this training is start with our question and do a complete read through. Because this is a novel in verse, we're basically close reading a poem. And this poem is going to use our favorite comparisons, right? Metaphor and simile. And I also listed personification as one of the comparisons because personification is a very close cousin of metaphor, right? If we were to really think about these three terms, all of them are different ways of comparing images together. A metaphor is a more direct but surprising, usually, kind of a comparison. A simile is a less direct, using the word like, but also still a comparison. Personification, also a comparison, bringing that lifelike verb to a non lifelike or inanimate or non human object or thing. All of these are the effort of them is to compare, right? The two things in the comparison are creating an effect from the author on the purpose of whatever this passage might be. So we know that these are the things that are going to be at work. Let's look at the question that we want students to answer. In the passage above, how does the author use figurative language comparisons, right? You could just use the word comparisons. Again, you could leave it at figurative language. You could reword this however you like. But how does the author use figurative language comparisons to reveal her complex feelings about returning home after her hospitalization? Now, I should change this and I should put whimsy, right? Reveal whimsies because I'm whimsies, so that we don't think the author and the speaker are the same person. Okay, so Whimsy's got a lot of complex feelings about returning home after her hospitalization. She is just returning back from an intake facility that was helping her through some very severe depression, suicidal thoughts, things like that. So she is recovering, and not for the first time, right? Coming back home again. And so the coming back home is its own emotionally turbulent and difficult experience, and that's what this passage is all about. Returning to Marsh Creek Lane. So, back home on Marsh Creek Lane. Let's give it a listen. I've been home long enough for the moon to be showing off again, blue hueing above the sleepy streets of Marsh Creek Lane, and my thoughts have gone wolf again, roaming, needlessly crafting innocent shadows into toil and trouble. My crystals moonbathe on my windowsill. Pink opal, blue goldstone, tiger's eye, and amethyst cleanse themselves, washing my negative energy from their pores. On the altar below my window, a box of herbs and a white plate with an offering. As for me, Whimsy, I nestle in my bed, covers pulled under my chin, inside my gray brick house that is sandwiched like an ice cream center between the other homes. Outside, streetlights spaced 10 feet apart spotlight the sidewalk like a guilty crime scene. Inside my room, notebooks gorged with stories and books stuffed with fairy tales sit in stacks like scattered stumps without branches. It is strange, despite my being gone for 2 weeks, nothing has changed in my room. Down the hall, filled with family portraits, grandma gone 9 years, mom, dad, brother, named Cole, allegedly MIA 10 years, and me, Whimsy. My parents sleep well with me within earshot again. I think it is too loud. The crickets outside gossip too much. I raise my sleep soggy body from bed, haul open my moonlit window to yell, "Enough with the chirping. We get it. You're joyful with sound." Of course, the crickets answer in a crescendo, threatening some sort of plague. I don't mind plagues, so I push the window all the way open and step barefoot onto the flat roof. I sit with my back pressed to the bricks and close my eyes and listen to the chirps and the resonant hoots of owls. The moonbeams bathe my face, and on nights like this, when the moon is big, I swear I feel Grandma in the shimmer hugging me tightly, holding me together. It feels like Grandma was reincarnated as the yellow light of moon rays. In a few hours, the house will yawn and wake. The crickets will hush to sleep. Mom will come to my room and say, "Honey, did you sleep well?" and watch me closely for signs. I'll say, "Yes," with bloodshot eyes, and she will know I'm lying. I'll blame my sleeplessness on the strange moon, on the crystals vibrating loudly on my windowsill. I'll mention the ancestors visiting and wanting to talk. Mom will cross her arms and say, "The ancestors want you to rest." I nod and stir my tea. I'll think of Grandma, dirt always thick under her nails, saying, "You have strong magic, child. It will make you feel many things." Grandma knew magic better than magic knew itself. She predicted her death to the hour, saying, "Here she comes on her black horse." Mornings, Dad will make pancakes and fried eggs. He'll smile widely, but it won't reach his eyes. I'll read my leaves closely before I jump on a bus that will ferry me to hell. I'll eat and smile and push the guilt down with syrup and juice, which makes it palatable. I'll cleanse my crystals each full moon, dry my herbs, and drink healing teas. I'll ground barefoot and wild in the dirt, and I'll still hurt at the root of me. I'll think of the forest at the end of Marsh Creek Lane and shudder. I'll think of Grandma wasting her final words on me, saying, "Magic child, your death is a long way away." So you can see tons and tons of examples of each of these different types of metaphors, similes, personifications, all these different kinds of comparisons. And so, one exercise that would be really powerful in kind of combining the overall impact of these would be to come up with, because we annotated for 3. I'm going to show you what this would look like on my board. So let's go ahead and make a 3 column sheet, right? So we'll do one here for our metaphors, one for our similes, and then one for our personification. We could also just do these 2 if we preferred, right? That'd be no problem. So then we're going to go back and we're going to actually pull them and stack them so that the students can see how these look all together. So, oh my gosh, you guys, no one told me. Okay, so there's an example of personification. Let's pull this one since we're here. I'm not going to do all of them, but I'm going to just get you the gist so you can see what this looks like when the piece is kind of broken up in this way. Okay, so the order matters in the piece, but for analysis, sometimes it's really fun to disturb that a little bit. So we're going to disturb that visually right now so that I can ask a couple of more questions before we start feeling like we already know everything. Because that's pretty classic students, right? They think they know everything because they labeled it all. Let's get her sleep soggy. Okay. And if you've worked with me before, you might know what I'm going to ask us to look at. Let's grab, again, it does not matter the order, not at all. Let's grab a couple more of our similes here. There's one. And then we'll grab one more. Sorry if this is making you dizzy. I'm showing this to you in real time for real life, as they say in Bluey. Okay, so for real life, we've got this. And like there are all kinds of cool ways you could get this to your front board, right? You could have kids do this like this, copy and paste, and then throw someone's up on the screen. You could have this printed, and you could be cutting out sentences and cutting out lines and doing this physically. We could be carouseling and highlighting and doing all kinds of cool things, whatever that might be. But here's what we want to do now that we have these isolated devices in front of us. My question for students would be, what patterns do you see? So we can look at patterns across everything, right? The entire experience of all of the comparisons. I can also ask them to tell me patterns they notice by column. So if we look at the metaphors, right, what kinds of patterns do we see in the metaphors? Now, I do not think that Amber McBride lined up specific patterns for just her metaphors and different ones for her similes and different ones for personification. This is mostly a construct to just organize thought, because then the patterns we find in metaphors are likely the same patterns we're going to find in the similes and the personification. It's just kind of a smaller chunk to start with. So we've got a sleep, soggy body. I feel grandma in the shimmer, right? The shimmer was referring to the moon, holding me tightly, holding me together, a bus that will ferry me to hell, and I still hurt at the root of me. So I know that I haven't gathered every single one, but one of the patterns right away that I'm noticing is that a lot of the comparisons are connected to the earth or nature, right? So we've got um, the root of me. We've got her sleep, soggy body, um, the shimmer of the moon, even the bus that will ferry me to hell, right? The ferry is river, right? We know it's the river of the underworld, but still, it's kind of like it's still on the list as a pattern. Um, Again, it's not exactly in this list, but we know that a lot of this has to do with her grandma, right? Or her family. Family is a pattern we see in this list. Okay, so that's a good start. What patterns do we see over here now that we are looking at similes? Let's get rid of the highlighting. Okay, it feels like grandma was reincarnated at the yellow light of moon rays. Okay, so again, grandma, moonlight, maybe we could just say light. Again, nature, right? Everything is good, right? Let's write it all down. Street light spaced 10 feet apart, spotlight the sidewalk like a guilty crime scene. That's a little bit jarring. Of all of the comparisons that even I can remember from the piece just right here in this moment, the street light conversation here, spotlighting the sidewalk like a guilty crime scene, does kind of shock a little bit. It almost has that same shock factor as the bus that will ferry me to hell. Like there are definitely things that Whimsy does not like about her neighborhood, about school, it seems. And that is maybe worth paying attention to in the work as a whole. I'm not sure that it's going to be helpful in this conversation, but maybe it will. Maybe it will. But that's not a pattern yet. That's kind of an outlier. So maybe we could just jot that down on the side somewhere, whatever you want to do. Gray brick house that is sandwiched like an ice cream center between other homes. Again, that's another kind of an outlier, right? That's such a sweet image of, summertime and ice cream, and ice cream sandwiches, like one of the best possible ice cream options there is. So that's a little bit of an outlier as well. I wouldn't find it in these patterns yet. So let's look at personification and see if we can nudge those into a place. The moon, okay, here's moon again. The moon to be showing off again, blue hewing above the sleepy streets, right? So the moon, we've got light. Even that color blue is part of that. I'll eat and smile and push the guilt down with syrup and juice, which makes it all palatable. Okay, so food. Um, Food, maybe. Now we got ice cream sandwiches and syrup and juice. So like things that are supposed to be sweet, but aren't really maybe we could kind of work on that thought and revisit it right in the text. The crickets outside gossip too much. I think this kind of a comparison here with the crickets. Definitely we've got nature again, but I would definitely note here with students too that we've got this tone, this snark. She's got it here. I think the bus that will ferry me to hell is a snarky comment here as well. So there's definitely some snark and attitude going on. And then from her grandma, here she comes on her black horse when she's predicting her own death. So now that we've noticed, right, these consistent patterns, it's going to help students write their sentences that respond to a question like this, right? Because we want their answers to be the author, uses blank. Oh my gosh, sorry guys. Blank to reveal Whimsy's complex feelings about returning. A more sophisticated claim, right? The next level of what we'd want them to say would be the author uses, oh my gosh, blank to reveal, Reveal. Come on, Amanda. Whimsy's blank about returning home after her hospitalization. Okay, so we'd want students to actually identify what those complex feelings are and be a little bit more specific about the kinds of comparisons. So this might say the author uses, let's say, comparisons to nature and the moon, and that's to reveal Whimsy's. What would we say if we were to go back? What comparisons of to nature and the moon? What would we say? I guess I kind of skipped this part. I got really excited. That what is it that those things are revealing about her feelings about being back? So if she's looking at the moon, right? What are some things that the moon is connected to, and why she would use the moon as her comparison, right? In this situation, it's showing off. Here, the crystals are moon bathing. So there is pride, there is peace, there is, where else is our friend the moon? The moon means bathe my face. Again, peace. There's a calmness with the moon and at nighttime, right? Just like that flat comparison of it being at night. It feels like grandma was reincarnated as the yellow light of moon rays. Okay, so we can confirm that the moon comparisons are, that is where she feels comforted and close to her grandma when she's home. So that would be my answer for this use of the moon. So let's give this comparison stage of the moon to reveal Whimsy's comfort being home with memories of her grandmother. Okay. And then what would we say if we looked at kind of nature? Nature is a little bit more on that snarky side, right? The bus that will ferry me to hell. The crickets are being so annoying outside. The root of me is still in pain. So comparisons. Okay, the author uses comparisons to nature and the moon to reveal Whimsy's what will we say? Is distress too harsh of a word? Her okay, I'm gonna say discomfort, but that's not the right word. Discomfort. Or we'll say pain. We'll say maybe pain? No, I don't know. Pain is, I'm really getting that from this last one. I still hurt at the root of me. So the nature imagery is bringing up pain, adjusting back to normal, as well as a feeling of comfort. Okay, so now we're getting too much, but I hope that you're kind of seeing, like, this is the very like live workshopy feeling that you can have when you're crafting these sentences and experiences with your students, right? So we want to make sure that this nature comparisons are providing this picture, right? pain adjusting back to normal. And we can workshop that. We need to go back and forth. We need to confirm that, in fact, that the pattern we recognize with all of the images we're comparing to nature do in fact showcase pain. And if pain's not the right word, then what is? And like, let's keep going, because metaphors work this way. They are really trying to, especially in a tight passage like this, they're trying to connect us to that other feeling. So we can workshop that. I feel much better about what I've done here with the moon and the feeling of comfort and being with memories of her grandmother and at nighttime. I really do like that. I might I might just stick with that for my example next time. But you guys get it. I did prepare for this event, but I wanted to do this part with you live so you could kind of just see the very natural process that I'm going through before I sit and do this with students. When I do this first, I catch these things and I see where it can go. It gives me the chance to poke and prod and direct and ask questions and step back and to see where students are going and not be blindsided when the kids are with me. So I want you to feel like you can do this on your own. You can go ahead and pull passages. Anytime you do something like this, especially with a novel in verse, we are only looking at one snippet of the whole story. So it's okay to say that certain things we're just going to kind of rule out because they are connected to other pieces of the story that we cannot see. But doing this work is so incredibly powerful for students to see how metaphors work, not just what they are, and not just learning how to highlight them, because that's not what we're here for. We want analysis. And analysis sometimes can just be a great conversation and an outline. It doesn't always have to be a full on literary analysis essay. It can just be this work right here, digging in and it being super duper messy. I'm okay with that, and I hope you are too. Thank you for joining me today. I was so fun working through this, so raw and just kind of unfiltered for you. I hope this gives you some ideas moving forward into your classroom, and we will see you again in our next training. Bye bye.